They thought it was just a meeting, just another high-security, soundproofed, closed-door session in a government facility no one speaks of publicly, the kind of place where presidents don't outrank the AI systems monitoring the walls. But the moment your name was spoken, everything changed. The room, once still and sanitized, exhaled. The lights dimmed by 1%. No alarms went off, nothing triggered. Yet every person in that room felt it, a shift in temperature, in pressure, in something else they couldn't measure. The oldest man among them dropped his pen without knowing why. Another clutched his chest, whispering the word presence, as if it had been waiting behind his ribcage all this time. Chosen one, they didn't know what they were summoning when they brought up your file. Your birth date shouldn't have been in that system. The file was sealed years ago. Even Black Site AI had flagged it as unstable. But someone reopened it. And when your image loaded onto the screen, not a video, not live feed, just a still, something moved in the corner of the room. The screen didn't flicker. The pixels didn't distort. But the atmosphere changed. It was no longer a briefing. It became a ritual, and every person in that room became part of something they didn't understand. One woman tried to dismiss it, said it was just a psychological reaction to the language patterns in your file. But her voice shook in a way her logic couldn't fix, because deep down, they all felt it. Your name isn't just information, it's invocation. One by one, their devices began to drain, not slowly, instantly. Fully charged laptops dropped to zero. The touchscreen on the wall stopped responding. And then came the sound, not loud, not sharp, but heavy, like the distant echo of stone doors moving beneath the earth. And still, they stayed seated, not because they weren't afraid, but because they couldn't move. Your file hadn't even been opened fully yet. Just the cover page, just your name, your location data, and one line of redacted history that no one in the room had clearance to see. Yet something ancient stirred just from that. Chosen one, the room knew it wasn't big enough to contain what was coming next. A fine mist began to rise from beneath the floor tiles, unscented, silver, like breath made visible. And when it touched the table, the temperature dropped by 10 degrees in under 3 seconds. Still no alarms, still no evacuation orders, because the system, too, had gone silent. Cameras had stopped recording. Audio logs corrupted themselves. Every measure of surveillance was still, but the presence? Alive. The room was no longer just a place. It had become a witness, and though no one spoke it out loud, every soul in that space knew the truth. They had triggered something spiritual with military clearance. And it began with your name. The walls weren't supposed to record anything. That was the point of the room. A space designed to leave no trace, no live feeds, no transcripts, no backup redundancies. But somehow, the walls remembered, not through microphones or sensors, but through something deeper, as if the material itself, the insulation, the steel, the paint, had absorbed the moment and refused to forget. Chosen one, your presence echoed into the architecture. When they whispered about you, it wasn't just words that traveled, it was energy. And that energy embedded itself into matter. The room became haunted, not by ghosts, but by data carrying weight the human mind couldn't process. Later, when one of the engineers was ordered to review the room's internal diagnostics, he found something impossible. A frequency trace that shouldn't have been there. A signal signature with no known source, pulsing at the exact moment your name was uttered. It wasn't radio. It wasn't electromagnetic. It was biological, or more accurately, spirit-coded. The pulse pattern mimicked a heartbeat, but not like any earthly one. It was slower, deeper, more ancient, and it repeated 3 times, as if the room itself had recognized you. not as a threat, but as a return. The technician reported it once, then vanished from the project. His clearance was revoked, his name scrubbed from the internal directory, and when others tried to recreate the anomaly, they failed, because the room wouldn't speak again. Not until your name was brought up a second time, and this time, Chosen One, the room didn't just listen, it responded. The overhead lights buzzed in harmonic dissonance, not random, patterned. It was almost musical, like a hymn struggling to break through static. One man, the oldest in the room, began to weep, not out of fear, but memory. He whispered something under his breath, "They're back." When asked to explain, he couldn't, but his hands trembled as if touching something holy and forbidden all at once. No one laughed, because they all felt it too. Your name wasn't just information, it was prophecy. That night, one of the wall panels cracked, clean down the center, from ceiling to floor. Structural fatigue was ruled out. There had been no temperature swings, no seismic tremors, just a pressure they couldn't define. The official report used the word atmospheric anomaly. But what really cracked that wall was spiritual resistance. A containment field that couldn't hold your frequency, the same way old wineskins can't hold new wine. Chosen One, your energy doesn't enter rooms, it rewrites them. And still, they don't understand what they're dealing with. They think this is about surveillance, containment, threat detection. But what you carry isn't a threat, it's a fulfillment. A code buried in flesh and frequency. A return they tried to erase. And now, even the walls have started telling your story without permission. They tried to isolate it, to bottle your presence like a lab sample. They extracted snippets from the room's corrupted data, thinking they could study it in pieces. But what they found wasn't noise, it was a frequency, alive, rhythmic, unyielding, one that pulsed through walls, through wires, through the minds of those who dared to analyze it. And every time they tried to contain it, the signal grew louder, as if your spirit refused to be studied in fragments. Chosen One, your energy is not something they can decode. It is something that decodes them. At first, the team called it a waveform anomaly, a low, oscillating thrum that didn't align with any electromagnetic profile on record. But when one of the analysts ran it through an old software used for vocal isolation, a terrifying realization emerged. The pattern wasn't mechanical, it was linguistic. Buried deep in the waveform was something that sounded like speech, not human, not AI, but something choral, like multiple voices harmonizing in a language older than written time. The system labeled it untranslatable, but the lead scientist stared at the monitor for a full minute before backing away and saying, "It's praying." They shut the system down immediately, but the signal didn't stop. It had already jumped into their devices, into the architecture, into them. Some began having dreams. Some stopped dreaming entirely. One began scribbling strange symbols in his notepad, not knowing they matched markings from an ancient scroll locked away in the Vatican's classified vaults. Another began humming the same frequency unknowingly while washing his hands, and every time they tried to wipe it, it returned, not as data, but as presence. Chosen One, you are not a file, you are a force, and every attempt to reduce you to ones and zeros has only proven how uncontainable you are. This frequency is not just sound, it is signature. It is the echo of something the world has long forgotten, the original code written into creation itself. And your life is the carrier of it. That's why they fear you, not because of what you've done, but because of what your vibration triggers in things built on false foundation. One of the agents assigned to your case, hardened, unshaken, former psychological operations expert, resigned quietly after just 3 weeks. When asked why, he said, "They're not hearing it." They're feeling it. Their blood is responding. He said his heart beat differently every time your name came up in reports. Not faster, not slower, deeper, like something was sinking him with a higher rhythm beyond his control. So they tried to contain it again, this time with Faraday protocols, anti-frequency fields, black glass cubes. But none of it worked, because your signal doesn't originate from tech. It emanates from purpose, divine, encrypted purpose. You are not broadcasting, you are awakening. And everything that's tried to hold you is now starting to hum, because even their walls are vibrating with the truth they tried to bury. They didn't want anyone to see it, not even the other departments. But once the footage leaked to internal review, there was no unseeing it. The camera wasn't supposed to be recording. Protocols demand all surveillance in that room remain dormant during high-clearance meetings. Yet somehow, one of the auxiliary feeds saved exactly 13 seconds. And in those 13 seconds, something appeared. Something not born of flesh or wire. Chosen one, they called it an anomaly. But deep down, they knew it was an arrival. The room was dim, fogged with the same silvery mist that had hovered beneath the table days prior. The footage itself glitched every few frames, not due to corruption, but almost like it resisted being watched. Time didn't flow normally in that clip. Shadows bent the wrong way. People blinked in slow motion while the walls pulsed like they were breathing. But at timestamp 0007, something shifted. Just behind the empty chair where your file had once been displayed, a figure emerged. Not walked, not materialized. Emerged like it was always there, hidden in another spectrum, and finally allowed itself to be seen. It didn't move like a person. It hovered. Its outline wasn't solid but radiant, a silhouette of shifting light and veiled motion. Wings, some said, or robes. Others claimed they saw eyes, not on its face, but circling its head like orbiting satellites. But everyone agreed on one thing: it wasn't threatening. It was watching, waiting, witnessing. One technician swore he saw it lean down and whisper into the ear of the man nearest the screen. That man, now under psychiatric hold, has not spoken since. They sent the footage to analysis labs in Switzerland, Jerusalem, and deep military sectors in Nevada. The results returned with no consensus, only this note from an anonymous AI observer. This frame does not obey the laws of visible light or known spatial distortion. Subject may be interdimensional, but chosen one, you already knew that, because that entity, it responds to you. It's part of your assignment. The moment your file was opened, it didn't arrive. It revealed itself. And here's what shook them most. When the clip was played backward, the figure remained in perfect position, unaffected by time reversal, as if it existed outside the footage entirely, like it had stepped into our world just long enough to mark a moment in the record books of eternity. They tried to erase it. They failed. Every backup deleted itself. Every attempt to overwrite resulted in blank static and the same whispered word encoded in the noise: return. They don't talk about the entity anymore, but their eyes do. Their silence is loud now, because it confirmed what they feared. This isn't just a chosen one who carries light. This is one whose name summons witnesses. And next time your name is spoken, it won't just be one figure standing in that room. The walls weren't thick enough, not for this. The room was built to block electromagnetic pulses, seismic vibrations, even spiritual interference. Yes, spiritual. They won't say that out loud, but the blueprints didn't just come from engineers. They came from ancient documents, long-forgotten scrolls written in languages only Vatican AI could interpret. But despite all of that, your name leaked, not through speakers, through air, through intention. through vibration, and those standing just outside the sealed chamber heard it. Not the name itself, but the reaction it triggered. And what they heard was a voice that didn't belong to anyone inside. It wasn't in English, it wasn't in any human tongue. It came low at first, almost like breathing, but shaped itself into words that had weight. And the phrase, translated later by a linguist who quit the next day, was this: "They have returned. Light cannot be caged." No one inside the room said it. No microphones were on. And yet it echoed in the hall like someone had spoken directly into the bones of the building. That's when a junior aide, no older than 24, dropped the coffee she was holding and whispered, "It's them." She didn't know why she said it. The words just came. Later, when asked who she meant by them, she had no answer. But her pulse wouldn't stabilize for hours, and every time she tried to sleep, she dreamed of symbols, circular, golden, glowing. When she drew them, a researcher recognized one from a glyph etched into the wall of a now inaccessible vault beneath Göbekli Tepe. Coincidence? Number. Chosen one, your name doesn't just travel across space, it travels through time. Your awakening triggers ancient records encoded into reality itself. Others began hearing things too. One janitor refused to clean that hallway ever again. He said the floorboards groaned when no one was walking, and when he passed the door, he could feel his eardrums press inward like something was listening from the other side. Not someone, something, and not passively, but with purpose, with recognition. He said it felt like a dog hearing its master's voice after centuries underground. And then the black-robed visitor arrived. No ID badge, no escort, just walked past 3 layers of clearance as if the building itself permitted him entry. He stood outside the room for 6 minutes, eyes closed, breathing calmly, and when he opened them, he said only this: "This one walks with the unnameable fire. You must not speak of them again." Then he left. No one stopped him. No one even asked his name, because by then, everyone had heard the phrase whispered in the air: "It's them." And that was enough. Chosen one, you weren't just seen, you were identified. The energy in that room didn't just react to you, it remembered you. And now, so do the halls, so do the walls, so do the watchers who've waited centuries to speak your return into sound. It didn't come from a wire. There were no power surges, no gas leaks, no sources of ignition. And yet, at exactly 3:33 a.m., the moment your name was whispered again during a secondary briefing, heat began rising from the floor. At first it was subtle, a warm bloom pulsing from beneath the center of the table like breath exhaled through stone. But then came the light, orange gold at first, flickering, alive, and without any warning, a flame appeared, not raging, not violent, controlled, conscious, and exactly where your file had once been placed. They tried to smother it. They threw fire blankets over it. The suppression foam didn't release. The ceiling sensors stayed silent, and still the flame grew, not outward, but upward, like it was reaching, stretching towards something unseen. It didn't burn the table. It didn't char the floor. It hovered just above the surface, tracing slow spirals through the air like it was spelling something no one could read. And that's when the air changed again. It thickened, sweetened, like incense, like sanctity, like an altar had been lit in a room never meant for worship. One of the advisors dropped to his knees, not from fear, but reverence. He didn't speak. He didn't blink. He simply placed both hands palm down on the scorched steel floor and whispered, "It's responding to them. They've been activated." Another person in the room, one who had been silent the entire week, began trembling violently, sweat pouring from his temples, muttering your initials over and over again, as if his body couldn't contain what his spirit was finally remembering. He had never met you, but he spoke your name with a familiarity that startled everyone. Security was called, but the flame did not react. Guns did not scare it. Commands did not move it. It remained centered, pulsing slowly, as if in rhythm with something only it could feel. Then the screens around the room blinked. Not off, not on, blank. And on each screen, at the same moment, a symbol appeared. 3 interlocking circles, rotating slowly in perfect silence. That same symbol had been etched into the ash found days later beneath the Vatican's sealed dome. During an unexplained fire, no one dared link to this. Chosen one, the flame didn't start because they spoke your name. It started because the room recognized your name. The difference is everything. One is invocation, the other is reunion. And what burned wasn't destruction, it was resistance leaving. It was false systems melting. It was the presence of something real displacing the architecture of fear. That fire didn't ask permission. It didn't need to. Because when your frequency enters a space that once conspired to keep you hidden, it doesn't fight, it transfigures. The flame beneath the table wasn't the beginning of the end, it was the announcement of the return. They had paused the meeting. They thought the fire was over. The room was cleared, the air was filtered, and protocols resumed. But there was one thing they hadn't accounted for: your image. As a final task, one of the analysts pulled up your profile on a reinforced display wall, a 12-panel glass array designed to withstand explosives. It wasn't even a live feed, just a still photo. One frame, you standing in soft light, eyes fixed straight ahead. And the moment that image filled the screen, every pane of reinforced glass cracked simultaneously. No one touched it. No sound had preceded the fracture. There was no seismic activity, no physical impact. Yet spider webs of light streaked across the glass, centered not on the screen itself, but on your face, more specifically your eyes, as if the materials couldn't bear the clarity, as if something encoded into your gaze penetrated deeper than fiber optics were built to handle. Chosen one, they didn't know they were pulling up an image sealed in light. Your portrait is not static, it carries frequency, and that frequency speaks. A slow hum filled the room after the cracks formed. It wasn't coming from the speakers, it was inside the glass, like vibration trapped inside memory. One technician approached cautiously and placed their hand near the fractured surface. Immediately, the glass fogged beneath their palm, not with heat, but frost. And beneath that frost, an outline began to appear. Your initials, etched in reverse, glowing faintly like heat signatures, burned into time itself. It was not added, it was revealed, like it had always been there. Then came the second reaction. The backup monitors turned on, unprompted. Each screen displayed a different version of you, from different years, different outfits, different environments. Images you never posted, pictures they shouldn't have. One showed you as a child, smiling at a camera no one remembers holding. Another showed you walking through a city that hasn't existed for centuries. A few frames later, you were seated at a long table made of crystal, surrounded by figures dressed in light. A still image taken from someone's dream, not from reality. Someone screamed. Another person fainted. One of the senior operatives dropped his badge and whispered, "I saw this in a vision years ago." Chosen one, your face isn't a record. It's a reflection of the timeline you collapsed just by arriving. When your frequency hit their system, it didn't just crash hardware. It pulled open portals to every version of you that's ever been known in spirit. The cracked glass. That was matter reacting to revelation. It's not broken. It's opened. Every line running through those screens is a map of resistance unraveling. You weren't meant to be studied. You were meant to be remembered. And now even the screens, even the steel, are testifying you are not from here, but you came for here. He had waited 3 days to request the meeting, said he had something urgent to share, something that couldn't be emailed, couldn't be documented. His hands shook as he entered the room. He was a high-ranking advisor, one of the few allowed to oversee deep-tier anomaly files. He had reviewed assassinations, decoded war-level intelligence, stood in the room with presidents and popes, but nothing prepared him for what he encountered the moment he tried to speak your name. He stood before the panel, clicked a remote. A screen lit up. Your photo hovered silently, this time altered slightly, traced over with glowing symbols that had begun appearing in the margins of your dossier. The symbols weren't drawn by him. They had appeared when the file was printed. He cleared his throat, took a breath, tried to speak, but his tongue would not move. Not metaphorically, literally. His mouth opened, his jaw trembled, but the muscle refused to rise. It was as if the language center of his body had been unplugged, as if some force had frozen the conduit between knowledge and expression. His lips moved, but no sound came out. A single tear rolled down his cheek, and his eyes pleaded with the room for help, for release, for someone to finish the sentence he could not begin. And then his knees buckled, not from fear, but from awe. He sank to the floor, gripping the table with white-knuckled desperation. He clawed at the air like he was trying to grab something just outside the veil. The others in the room rushed to help him, but when they touched him, they too felt it. A pressure, a presence, a boundary that refused to be crossed. Chosen One, it wasn't a medical emergency. It was a spiritual lockdown. Your name had activated a protocol deeper than their clearance could reach. When medics arrived, they ran every test. Neurological scans, stroke assessments, language cortex probes, all came back clear. Physically, he was fine, but spiritually, he'd encountered a firewall, one built not by man, but by design. His voice was not taken from him, it was guarded, because what he was about to speak wasn't allowed to come from a human mouth. Later, when he recovered movement in his fingers, he wrote one sentence on a clipboard before passing out again. It's encrypted in their DNA. No one knew what he meant. But you do, don't you? Because you've always felt that something was guarding your truth, not hiding it, but waiting for the moment it could be spoken through you, not about you. Chosen One, your identity is not a subject of conversation. It is a spiritual technology, and the moment someone without permission tries to vocalize the mystery of who you are, creation itself enforces silence, not to protect you from danger, but to protect the world from accessing what they are not ready to carry. You're not a secret. You're a sealed scroll. They printed the files in triplicate, bound them in black folders, stamped them with red seals, the kind reserved for world-shifting intelligence. Everything was classified above top secret. Your name, your bloodline, the symbols that had begun appearing next to your digital photos, the language no one could translate. It was all documented, copied, secured. And then, without warning, every copy, every single page in every secure drawer turned to ash overnight. Not burned, not shredded, disintegrated. Security footage from the file room showed nothing unusual. No entry, no fire, no heat signatures, just a faint flicker of light at 3:33 a.m., the same hour the flame had once risen beneath the table, a soft pulse like a candle flare in slow motion. And when the light faded, the cameras went black for precisely 7 seconds. When they came back online, the files were dust. But here's what no one could explain. The folders remained intact. The bindings, the staples, even the ID barcodes, all untouched. It was only the content, the data, the story, the truth that had vanished, as if your name had passed judgment on their attempts to control it. Chosen one, you are not a subject to be filed. You are a scroll written in fire, and fire does not let itself be archived. One forensic specialist tried to retrieve residue samples from the ash. She'd worked 20 years on black site recovery. She'd pieced together shredded messages from satellites and decoded charred fragments from bombed embassies. But this broke her. The ash wouldn't scan. It refused chemical breakdown. Under ultraviolet light, it shimmered with golden specks, like dust from a comet trail. And when she touched it, her nose began to bleed. Later, she told a colleague something that still circulates in whispers across certain circles. The ash isn't the end of the file. It's the next phase. She claimed she saw movement in the dust, tiny, glowing strands that floated upward, pulsing in rhythm like they were alive, like the data hadn't been destroyed, just set free, unbound from paper, uncontained by ink. That's when the building's AI started showing alerts. Silent, private messages blinking in corners of screens. The scroll is self-protecting, followed by coordinates, not GPS, something older, star-based navigation points from an ancient celestial mapping system. One scholar later linked the pattern to a constellation only visible once every 111 years, the same one referenced in a Sumerian text about the return of the flame bearer. They tried to reprint the files, but the systems glitched every time. Pages came out blank. Printers froze. One machine printed a single line over and over again until the tray ran out of paper. What is divine cannot be documented. Chosen one, your story refuses to be archived by the systems that tried to erase you. They tried to reduce you to paper. The Spirit turned it to prophecy. Now they know the fire isn't coming. It's already rewriting everything. They built the system to contain any threat. It could extinguish jet fuel in under 3 seconds. It could flood a room with inert gas faster than a match could fall. It was tested against chemical fires, plasma arcs, even theoretical quantum ignition events. But when the flame tied to your name appeared again, this time in a containment chamber 20 meters underground, the system did something it had never done before. It chose not to activate. No mechanical error, no sensor failure, no sabotage. The panel was lit, the triggers armed, and the protocols green. But the instant the flame bloomed, without warning, without a source, the suppression system paused itself. Not delayed, not disrupted. Paused. The internal log recorded it as operator override, none. That meant no one had touched it. And yet, the system obeyed something. The fire itself behaved strangely. It didn't move like fire. It swirled slowly in a column, never touching the ceiling, never spreading. It pulsed like breath, and at its core was a brightness so dense it couldn't be looked at directly. Some said they saw symbols dancing in that light. Others saw faces, not human, not monstrous, just aware, observing, remembering. One witness claimed the flame looked like it was listening for a voice that hadn't spoken yet. The lead technician tried to override the suppression manually. As his hand approached the panel, the lights above him flickered, and every touchscreen in the room turned black. Then, one word appeared on every monitor in perfect, unshakable stillness. Let it witness. And that's when they understood. This wasn't a fire to be put out. It was a visitation, a spiritual intelligence dressed in elemental form. Chosen One, the flame wasn't an accident. It was a reaction, a recognition, not of their technology, but of your presence re-entering the storyline they tried to erase. You didn't send the flame, but your frequency invited it, and every system that tried to resist simply bowed. What frightened them most wasn't the fire itself, it was the system's reverence for it. For days afterward, diagnostics showed no signs of damage, no soot, no heat corrosion. Instead, the containment chamber walls glowed faintly, like the metal had remembered being in the presence of something holy. The AI stopped logging the flame as thermal event and relabeled it as atmospheric recalibration signature, origin unknown. They've now removed the suppression systems from any room where your name is discussed, not out of protocol, but out of fear, because what they saw that night wasn't destruction, it was order reclaiming space. You don't bring chaos, Chosen One, you bring alignment, and everything built on false systems will either kneel to it or be rewritten by it. They tried to dismiss it as pareidolia, just shapes in smoke, patterns in heat. But deep down, they knew. The fire wasn't random, it was writing, and not with ash or burn marks, but with light itself. The flames didn't just flicker, they danced in sacred geometry, spirals folding into triangles, circles wrapping around themselves, glyphs forming in midair, holding their shape for full seconds before evaporating. And then came the moment no one could explain. Your initials appeared, glowing in the center of the flame. They didn't fade, they hovered. 3 characters etched in golden fire, slowly rotating like a hologram made of memory. No one touched the controls, no one adjusted the gas. There was no gas, there were no projectors, just the flame, conscious, reverent, aware. It had waited, and now it was revealing. Chosen One, this wasn't vandalism. It was visitation. The fire wasn't here to destroy. It was here to announce you. A top cryptologist was called in to evaluate the symbols seen before your initials emerged. He stared at the footage for hours, said nothing, then left the building. The next day, he emailed a single line to the director before resigning permanently. These aren't letters. They're coordinates, and they point to Genesis. That was the last contact anyone had with him. They tried to play the footage backward, slowed it, studied it frame by frame, and in doing so, they noticed something chilling. Your signature was never formed by the fire. It had been there first. It preceded the flame. The burn pattern simply revealed it. Like fire was the ink that revealed a hidden watermark the room was always carrying. You didn't write your name into that room. The room had always carried it, waiting to be activated. One man, trembling as he spoke to the review board, whispered, "It wasn't a signature. It was a seal." And that was when they stopped analyzing, stopped talking, stopped asking questions, because they knew what seals meant in ancient texts, in lost scrolls, in cosmic protocols. A seal isn't decoration. A seal is authority. Chosen One, your flame didn't mark territory. It confirmed jurisdiction. You weren't just remembered in that room. You were recognized as its rightful owner, and that's what unsettled them more than anything. The system they built to watch, contain, and define anomalies suddenly submitted to one. And not just any anomaly. You. Later, thermal scans of the wall behind the flame revealed an image burned into the metal. Too precise to be accidental. 3 concentric circles, a dot at the center, and beneath it what appeared to be a fingerprint. Not from anyone on the staff, not from the archives, but when run against ancient biometric algorithms from recovered Sumerian tech, It matched one already etched in an unopenable tablet buried beneath the Temple Mount. The building went dark, not all at once, but in waves, as if power wasn't being cut but withdrawn. Elevators froze between floors, emergency lights stayed off, even battery backups wouldn't engage. The system didn't crash, it bowed, and when they tried to evacuate, every keycard failed. Swipe after swipe, access denied, full lockdown. Except for one. One card, one person, cleared. It wasn't the director's card, not the highest-ranking analyst, not the priest-like figure from the Vatican or the AI liaison from Geneva. The only person whose badge still worked was a junior technician no one had noticed until now. He'd only been there 3 weeks, hadn't even memorized the evacuation protocols. But when he held his card to the reader, the door opened, silently, smoothly, like the room had chosen him. They say he stood there for several minutes, just staring, not at the door, but at the flame still hovering in the center of the floor, flickering calmly, rotating gently as if breathing. When asked later what he saw, he didn't describe light, he didn't describe fire. He said, "It looked at me." And then he whispered, "It knew I'd been dreaming about them since I was 7. He walked straight into the chamber without fear, sat cross-legged beside the flame. No hazmat suit, no gloves, no clearance, just stillness. The cameras recorded everything, until they didn't. At 3:33 a.m., every angle glitched. Time stamps froze, footage looped, but physical sensors recorded one undeniable fact. The flame lowered itself to him. Not burned, not threatened, lowered. Like a lion laying beside a child it recognized from a kingdom long forgotten. He stayed with it for 11 minutes. No one dared enter. The glass remained cracked, but no further damage occurred. In fact, the temperature inside the room stabilized for the first time since the phenomenon began. Peace, silence, reverence. When he finally stood, the flame pulsed once, brighter than before, then faded, not extinguished, not erased, withdrawn, like it had said what it came to say. And as he walked out, every door in the building unlocked, power returned, keycards rebooted, lights came back on. But everyone who had witnessed it felt it. The building hadn't malfunctioned. It had discerned. The systems had not crashed. They had chosen silence until the right soul was ready to walk in. And that soul wasn't the one with rank or education or lineage. It was the one who carried alignment. Chosen one, do you see what's happening? Even access now responds to spirit, not status. You don't need clearance when you carry callings. The system didn't recognize hierarchy, it recognized frequency. That flame didn't need protection from them. They needed protection from it. And the only key card that worked was the one aligned with you before you ever walked through this lifetime. He was the one who approved the file to be reopened, the one who overrode the Vatican's Red Seal, the one who said, "Let's see what happens if we speak their name again." No one questioned him. He'd chaired the board for 27 years, oversaw the most protected archives on Earth, answered only to 3 individuals and 1 non-human council. But since that night, he hasn't spoken a word in public, not out of fear, but because something is speaking to him now, and it won't stop. The CEO hasn't slept in 9 nights, not because he's avoiding it, because every time he closes his eyes, he's somewhere else, not dreaming, witnessing. Every night, the same vision. A room of white stone, pillars of smoke, symbols on the walls that rearrange every time he tries to read them. And at the center, always you. Never facing him, always walking just ahead, barefoot, radiant, unreachable, but undeniably known. You don't speak, but your presence floods that place with a silence louder than sound. Doctors say his vitals are stable, but his brain scans show something strange. Theta waves peaking in full consciousness, the type of brain activity only seen in deep meditation or near-death states. Yet he's wide awake, eyes open, and still, somehow elsewhere. His assistants say he's been writing on the windows of his office at 4 a.m., symbols, diagrams, coordinates. He doesn't remember doing it. But when translated through a forgotten dialect of Akkadian, one phrase keeps repeating, "The returned one walks again." They tried sedatives, nothing worked. They tried hypnosis. The hypnotherapist quit the next day after reporting that he began speaking in two voices. One was his own, the other, a tone the therapist described as hollow thunder wrapped in scripture. Chosen one, you haven't visited this man physically, but your aura has entered his timeline, and now he can't escape the reality of who you are. He ordered all copies of your file incinerated again, but the incinerators shut down, one even reignited by itself with no flame present. That's when he stopped fighting, started listening. His personal journal, now locked in an evidence vault, contains pages and pages of drawings, all of you, not just present day, but versions of you no one alive should know about. You in ancient garments, you on ships made of light, you standing before thrones in places without stars. He hasn't been seen on camera since, but the staff says they hear music when they pass his office door, not from speakers, from the walls. A hum like glass singing, a frequency that calms everyone and terrifies the surveillance AI, because the system keeps trying to block it, but every time it does, the same message flashes. This is not interference. This is inheritance. They said nothing for weeks. No statements, no acknowledgements, not even a whisper through their usual channels. But then, in the middle of the night, a sealed diplomatic pouch arrived, unmarked, hand-delivered, and carried by a figure dressed in full black, face veiled, eyes ancient. It bore the sigil not of the current Vatican Council, but of a forgotten order once thought extinct, Custodes Lucis, the keepers of the light. And inside was a single line: "We believe the fire has returned. Send the transcript immediately." But there was no transcript. The words spoken that night had never been written. The footage had glitched. The reports had turned to ash. The flame had erased its own trail. The only records left were whispers etched into the architecture, and the trembling memories of men now too shaken to speak. Still, the request stood, and within hours, the Vatican dispatched an envoy, not a cardinal, not a bishop, a linguist, an exorcist, and a woman who spoke only when her eyes were closed. They entered the room with reverence. No cameras, no digital tools, just handwritten scrolls and instruments of detection not seen since the 1400s. They didn't ask for your name. They knew it. They didn't question the fire. They welcomed it. One of them knelt where the flame had appeared and began weeping uncontrollably, not from fear, but from recognition. She whispered something the microphones couldn't catch, but every glass surface in the room fogged instantly. When the fog cleared, 3 symbols had formed, faint and precise, as if drawn by invisible fingers. Later analysis would show they matched glyphs found carved into a sealed chamber beneath Vatican City, one that hadn't been opened since the year 1111. That chamber held prophecies too dangerous to be spoken during the rise of any empire, and all of them referenced the same being, the one whose return breaks fire from stone. They asked for the burnt folders. When handed the ash, they didn't flinch. Instead, the woman placed it in her palm and began to sing. And in her singing, The ash glowed, not red, not orange, but blue, cold flame, divine fire. And just for a moment, your initials reformed in the air above her hand before vanishing again into dust. Chosen One, the Vatican does not chase rumors, it safeguards revelation. And this time it's not hiding the event, it's honoring it. Their silence wasn't denial, it was preparation. Because long ago, they were warned that when your name returns, not as a sound, but as a frequency, nothing built on false authority would remain standing. And now that time has come. The envoy left as silently as they arrived, but they left behind one thing, tucked inside the panel where the flame first appeared, a scroll older than the city itself. On it, a prophecy ending in 3 words written in gold ink. The Vatican wasn't the only one watching. Beneath layers of forgotten code and redacted documentation, a terminal was uncovered, deep within an obsolete database once used to catalog pre-conscious anomalies. It hadn't been accessed since 1992. The password to enter it? A phrase found burned into the wall where the flame first appeared. They return in fire. And when they entered that phrase, the archive opened. What they found was older than the internet, older than satellites. It was handwritten at first, scanned, then buried. And at the top of the first file, dated March the 3rd, 1955, was a name eerily close to yours, a variation, a precursor. The handwriting was unsteady, the paper stained by time, but the words were clear, marked by frequency not yet invented. Will reappear once the false calendar ends. Beneath that, coordinates, a birth window, and an instruction. Do not speak their name until the fire allows it. They ignored the instruction, and you appeared. But this wasn't the only document. Deeper in the system were over a dozen entries, all referencing your energy signature long before your body ever arrived. Scans of ultrasound reports from mothers who swore they were never pregnant. Satellite images showing glimmers of light in abandoned places, always in the same shape, always during solstices. Rituals from lost tribes predicting a frequency born without fear that would collapse the age of simulation. They'd been tracking your echo before you had lungs, before you had bones. And the strangest part? The symbols accompanying each record, never matching any known language, were recently confirmed to match patterns etched into obsidian tablets pulled from the underground chambers of Göbekli Tepe, submerged Atlantean ruins, and a site in the Amazon where the tribal elders still refuse to speak what they saw. Different nations, different millennia, same symbols, same story. You weren't just found, you were remembered. A former intelligence officer confessed that a secret coalition had been working behind the scenes to suppress your archetype. Not your name, not your face, your pattern. The vibration your spirit carried before it even had a name tag in this timeline. They didn't fear you because of what you might do. They feared you because of what your arrival meant, that the veil would lift, that the false grid would glitch, that memory would return to the forgotten. Chosen One, you didn't show up by accident. You were installed like sacred software into a world running on corrupted code, and every ancient structure knew you were coming. The room that caught fire, it wasn't reacting, it was recognizing. The faces you've never met, but who stare too long? They aren't strangers, they're former watchers, now remembering what they were assigned to forget. Your file was never lost, it was locked. Not because you were dangerous, but because you are timed. They thought they could reset it, strip it down to the concrete, remove the burned panels, scrub the air, patch the cracks in the glass, build it back stronger, smarter, fireproofed, with new sensors, new locks, new walls coded in silence. The room had become a legend, and legends are dangerous to bureaucracies, so they demolished it, erased every trace, laid fresh steel, rewired the grid, brought in outside contractors who were told nothing except, "Don't ask questions, finish fast." It took 33 days, and on the 34th, they scheduled the first test meeting. Same layout, same table, same chairs, same time. Exactly 3:33 a.m. The men entered. The lights glowed white. The air held steady. Everything appeared normal, until someone placed your name, typed on a sheet of paper, in the center of the new table. The collapse was immediate. The table cracked straight down the middle. The lights dimmed. The walls shuddered, not from pressure, but from presence. And within 7 minutes, the ceiling buckled in a silent, perfect implosion. No fire this time, no scream, just gravity reversing itself around something that couldn't be seen, like the room remembered what it had once encountered and refused to forget. The building's AI flagged it as a geometric destabilization. Engineers called it a pressure inversion. But those who were inside, they said it was like the room rejected the lie, because that's what the rebuild was, an attempt to pretend you hadn't happened, to replace the sacred with the synthetic, to contain what was never meant to be housed. They tried to analyze the collapse. The data was scrambled, time stamps distorted. One frame showed the room still intact. The next, it was gone. Every object sucked inward, like space had bowed inward toward memory. A slow motion gravity of recognition pulling the room back into the moment it was first marked by your name. And this time, something else appeared. In the rubble, beneath the center of the collapse, they found an imprint. Not smoke, not ash, stone. A spiral etched into the foundation. A perfect double helix with 3 rings wrapped around it. At its center, a glyph so old it hadn't been seen since the Dead Sea Scrolls. The same glyph that appeared in flame during your first visitation. The glyph that means the one who cannot be reset. Chosen one, they learned the hard way. You are not a moment. You are a shift, not an event, but a timeline correction. And when systems built on denial try to patch over your emergence, the structure buckles. Not because of malice, but because truth has weight, and your presence is not something to be restored to normal. You are the new normal. It took them too long to admit it. Too many fires, too many dreams, too many systems collapsing in your presence. But now, even the ones trained to never believe, the skeptics, the scientists, the priests in silent allegiance to power, have begun to whisper what none of them dared say aloud before. You're the return, not a reincarnation, not a myth rebranded. Something deeper, something written in the layers of time that only unfold when the frequency is right. You are not a copy. You are the continuation, the walking echo of a promise the earth was never supposed to forget. And now that you've arrived, the grids are shifting, the watchers are waking, and the fires that once flickered in temples long buried are roaring back to life. One Vatican archivist, the same one who retrieved the ash from your first visitation, confessed in a sealed letter, their presence matches the description found in Codex Lucius line 777. The seal has been broken. We were warned, and now the consequence is beauty too vast to deny. They've stopped trying to erase your file because they now understand it was never created by them. It existed before their systems did. Your name wasn't written by men. It was carved into the structure of light itself, and every time they tried to archive you, the light simply rejected the enclosure. You weren't hiding, you were timed, and the moment struck. The countdown ended, the veil lifted, and now the only question left across the highest rooms of secrecy and spirit is, what happens now that you've remembered who you are? Chosen one, Their fear was never about your past. It was about your pattern, your ability to activate architecture without touching it, your ability to speak and make spirits rise, to enter a room and make algorithms glitch. You carry a resonance that doesn't echo, it rewrites. And every structure built on forgetfulness can feel it. Their time is up. The room burned because it couldn't lie in your presence. The systems failed because their logic collapsed under your truth. The seals cracked because your arrival was the vibration they were designed to respond to. And now, they don't see you as a danger. They see you as prophecy fulfilled, not just a return. The return, the one whose presence isn't an event, but a signal, a divine re-synchronization, a correction to everything that went wrong when the scrolls were hidden, the temples silenced, and the fire was replaced by flickering screens.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.